Subnavigator Issel Thor had been studying the humans for 14 years, and in all that time, the one thing that unsettled him most was not their wars, not their biology, not even their inexplicable habit of naming their weapons after ancient dead gods. It was their silence. Every spacefaring civilization Issel had catalogued, and he had catalogued 37, communicated constantly. They broadcasted territorial warnings, resource claims, diplomatic identifiers, navigational hazards. Civilization, at its core, was noise. The Thranosai fleet alone generated 4,000 distinct electromagnetic signals per hour just from routine operations. The Morkai sang coordinates to one another in overlapping harmonics. The Vensulhari transmitted records in tight, compressed pulses that painted the void like a heartbeat. Humans, when they moved through space, were nearly quiet. Their vessels hummed with compressed energy, yes, sensor arrays could confirm that. But they broadcast almost nothing. No territorial claims. No navigational chatter. No warnings to one another. They moved through the dark like something that had decided, long ago, that announcing its presence was unnecessary. Issel found that deeply, profoundly wrong in a way he struggled to articulate to people who outranked him, which was nearly everyone. He was standing at his sensor station on the lower bridge of the Semdas Eternal. The Fleet Lord's flagship, a vessel that had sailed for 200 years without a single hull breach, when the alert first appeared on his screen. A contact. Long range. 4.2 light-hours out, near the edge of the Vethra corridor. Small. Singular. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at it again. He began, very quietly, to blink. The Semdas Eternal was the crown jewel of the Thranosai 5th Imperial Fleet, and the 5th Imperial Fleet was, without meaningful debate, the most powerful assembled military force in this region of the galaxy. 127 vessels. Fleet Lord Vorkai Semdas stood at the center of the Eternal's command throne, not sitting, never sitting during operations, a personal discipline he had maintained for 200 years. And surveyed the holographic display of his fleet with the quiet satisfaction of a master sculptor regarding a completed work. His skin glowed its customary deep imperial violet. Around him, the bridge hummed with 340 crew members performing their functions with clockwork precision. The air carried the faint mineral scent of recycled Thranosai atmosphere, cool, thin, with a trace of salt. In his left primary hand, he held a small carved token. A piece of fortress wall from Kethvara, a moon he had personally besieged for 11 years and starved into surrender. He had carried it for 2 centuries. He touched it when making decisions. It was his proof that patience and power always win. He was rolling it between his fingers when Communications Officer Veth Sul spoke. Fleet Lord. Long-range sensors have confirmed a contact in the Vethra corridor. Single vessel. Class profile does not match known configurations. Holding position at 4.2 light-hours. Vorkai did not look up from the holographic display. Thranosai? No, Fleet Lord. Morkai Remnant? No. He looked up then. Not because he was concerned. Because he was curious. Then what? Veth Sul's bioluminescence flickered, barely, professionally suppressed. Human, Fleet Lord. Best estimate. Silence. Then, from the tactical station to Vorkai's right, Weapons Marshal Dorvan Koss burst into a sound that Thranosai rarely made. A full, open, unrestrained laugh, all 6 arms spreading wide, his battle gold skin blazing with amusement. One human ship. Koss managed, when he recovered. They've sent one. Several officers joined the laughter. The sound spread across the bridge like a tide. Vorkai did not laugh. He merely resumed rolling the carved token between his fingers and allowed himself the smallest possible curve of his expression, the Thranosai equivalent of deep, quiet amusement. Plot their position, he said. Standard surveillance distance. Let us see what they want. It was, he reflected, almost touching. Humans and their gestures. At his lower station, Thor was not laughing. He was staring at his sensor data and blinking very rapidly. The contact was wrong. That was the only word his mind would produce. Wrong. He had the energy signature on his screen, a complex layered reading that his array had been processing for 4 minutes and had still not fully resolved. Every human vessel Issel had ever catalogued produced energy signatures with a specific harmonic pattern. It was the fingerprint of their technology. This contact signature did not match. It was not close to matching. It was not a variation. The signature was entirely different, a deep, layered oscillation that his system kept trying to categorize and kept failing to categorize, producing a result code he had only seen twice in his career. Unknown origin. No match in 3,000-year database. His hands moved over his station quickly, running a secondary analysis. Then a tertiary. Then he pulled up the spectral breakdown and stared at the layered frequency display until his eyes ached. The architecture of the energy was old. Not human old. Not Thranosci old. The specific mathematical relationship between the frequency bands was something he had seen referenced only in theoretical archaeology papers. In footnotes about extinct civilizations. He stood up. He was aware, distantly, that standing up without being addressed was a breach of protocol for a 4th-tier subnavigator. He was aware that the bridge was still flavored with the remnants of laughter and that his timing was, professionally speaking, extremely poor. He stood up anyway. Fleet Lord. His voice came out steadier than he felt. I need to report an anomaly in the contact's energy signature. The vessel's energy signature does not match any human technology on record. The harmonic pattern is, Fleet Lord, it is consistent with pre-collapse Vethkarani architecture. The Vethkarani were extinct, Vorkai said simply. For 40,000 years. Yes. Which means the humans are not. Operating alien salvage, Vorkai finished, and the corners of his expression curved again. Yes, subnavigator. We are aware that the younger civilizations pick through the ruins of their betters. If they have found a Vethkarani artifact and fitted it with running lights, I am impressed by their ambition and unmoved by their capability. The Vethkarani have been gone for 40 millennia. Whatever technology they possessed has had 40 millennia to become inert. With respect, Fleet Lord, I am not certain that is. Subnavigator. Vorkai's voice did not rise. It simply became colder, which was somehow more effective. Return to your station. Issel sat down. Junior Tactical Analyst Proc Nim, Issel's station neighbor, the closest thing he had to a friend on this vessel, leaned 2 inches toward him and spoke barely above a whisper. You worry too much, Issel. Issel looked at his screen. The system was still running its analysis, still failing to resolve the signature, still returning the same codes over and over. Unknown origin. No match in 3,000-year database. Power output. Cannot calculate. Exceed scale. He stared at those words for a long moment. Then he very deliberately began composing a flagged report, lowest priority, directed at the Fleet Intelligence Office. Not because he thought they would read it quickly. Because he wanted a timestamp on record. He wanted the record to show that he had said something, at this exact moment, before anything else happened. 14 years of studying humans had taught him one thing above all else. Their silence was not an absence. It was a choice. For light hours away, across a distance that would take conventional Thranosci drives nearly 6 hours to cover, the vessel held its position. It was not large. Approximately 340 meters in length. No visible weapons arrays. Its hull was dark, and it reflected very little light, and its shape was unusual. Not in any way Vorkai's bridge crew could specifically identify. Just unusual in the way that something is unusual when it does not follow the rules you assumed everything followed. It was not broadcasting identification. It was not broadcasting warnings. It was not broadcasting anything. It simply waited, in the dark, at the edge of the Vethra corridor, while 127 ships of the most powerful fleet in the region painted it with every sensor array at their disposal. After 11 minutes, it spoke. One channel. Clean signal. The voice was a human voice, female by the species classification, tone flat, cadence professional, the way a Thranosci civil administrator might sound when confirming the receipt of a routine shipment. This is Commander Yael Oren, United Earth Vessel Coordinator, Diplomatic Clearance Division. You are operating in a designated human exclusion corridor. You have 60 seconds to reverse your fleet. The bridge was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then Dorvan Koss laughed again, louder than before, and this time he was not alone. 127 ships. Combined armament sufficient to end a civilization. And a single small vessel, dark and still in the corridor ahead, had just given them 60 seconds. Vorkai did not laugh. He stood at his command throne and looked at the display, and his skin glowed its deep imperial violet, and he rolled the carved token from Kethvara's wall between his fingers. 60 seconds, he said quietly. To no one in particular. Should I respond, Fleet Lord? Veth Sul asked. Vorkai considered this for exactly 3 of those 60 seconds. No. The countdown, which no one on the bridge was formally tracking, continued in silence. At the lower station, Issel had stopped composing his report. He was staring at the energy readings on his screen. In the last 4 minutes, the readings had changed. The deep oscillation at the core of the vessel's signature had shifted. It had deepened. The mathematical relationship between the frequency bands was evolving, bending toward a configuration that Issel's academic memory recognized from the archaeology papers, from the footnotes, from the theoretical reconstructions that their authors had always concluded with variations of the same phrase. No civilization has ever demonstrated the ability to operate Vethkarani core architecture at full resonance. The energy requirements alone would. The 60 seconds ended. Issel was already holding his station's emergency grip with both hands when the dark ship did something to the sensors on the Semdas Eternal that was not an attack, was not a weapon discharge, was not anything that appeared in the fleet's threat catalog. It sang. That was the only word that appeared in Issel's mind for what the readings showed. The deep oscillation of the vessel's energy signature expanded outward in a perfect spherical wave, a resonance pulse that his instruments captured in complete detail and his mind could not organize into any category he had words for. The pulse reached the outermost layer of the fleet formation in 4.3 seconds. 7 rapid response interceptors at the outer edge simply stopped. No explosion. No hull breach. No cascade failure of systems leading to readable shutdown. They stopped the way a word stops when someone forgets it mid-sentence, completely, cleanly, without remainder. Their drives went dark. Their systems went dark. Their signals went dark. 7 ships. In 4.3 seconds. Not destroyed. Just off. The bridge of the Semdas Eternal went absolutely silent. Vorkai was still rolling the carved token between his fingers. He had stopped. He was looking at the display where 7 green signal markers had become gray. Report, he said. Veth Sul's voice, when it came, was perfectly controlled. The control was the only sign of what was underneath it. 7 interceptors at outer formation ring. All signals lost. No distress signals preceding loss. No debris field detected. Weapons discharged from the human vessel. None detected, Fleet Lord. The silence continued for 4 more seconds. Then Dorvan Koss spoke, and his voice had lost exactly none of its confidence. Equipment failure. Mass cascade, the outer ring runs the same drive generation series, a fault line in the model could. 7 ships, Issel said, from his station, to no one who was going to listen. In 4.3 seconds. The same generation series does not produce simultaneous failure across 7 separate vessels with no distress signal and no debris. Subnavigator. Koss did not turn around. I did not ask for your analysis. Vorkai was staring at the display. His skin had not changed color. It was still imperial violet, but something in the quality of that violet had shifted by some fraction of a degree, and Issel, who had studied bioluminescent emotional expression as part of his early academic work, recognized what that fraction of a degree meant. The Fleet Lord was not certain. For perhaps the first time in 200 years, Vorkai Semdas was looking at something and not being certain. He touched the carved token from Kethvara. Once. Deliberately. Advance the second formation ring, he said. Full sensor sweep. If it is a weapon, we will see it this time. Fleet Lord. Issel was standing again. Fleet Lord, I strongly recommend we do not advance. The energy signature has increased by a factor of 9 since the pulse. Whatever the vessel did, it has not finished doing it. The Vethkarani architecture, Fleet Lord, the theoretical models suggest that what we just observed is not a weapon. It is a calibration. The system is adjusting to the targets. It is. Stand down, Issel. Vorkai's voice was not cold now. It was simply final. Or I will have you removed from the bridge. Issel sat down. He sat down, and he looked at his screen, and the numbers on his screen looked back at him, and the deep oscillation at the center of the dark ship's energy signature continued to deepen toward a configuration that the theoretical models said was not operationally possible for any civilization that currently existed. Not impossible. Just not possible for civilizations that currently existed. Across the fleet display, 32 ships of the second formation ring began their advance. At her observation post 4.7 light-years from the engagement, Archivist Thesu of the 7th Record sat before a display that covered an entire wall of their station and watched the engagement feed with the calm attention of someone who had watched 4,400 conflicts across a career spanning millennia. They had seen the 7 interceptors go dark. They had seen the energy reading from the human vessel. They had run their own analysis. In 4,400 recorded conflicts, Thesu had used the classification decisive engagement only 11 times. Events that changed galactic history. They stared at the display for a long moment. The second formation ring was advancing. The dark ship had not moved. Their primary hand was hovering over the classification terminal. And the second formation ring was still advancing toward the dark ship that sang in frequencies 40,000 years old. And Issel Thor, at his station on the Semdas Eternal, was watching his numbers and breathing very carefully and saying nothing at all. And somewhere, 4.2 light-hours away, Commander Yael Oren had not spoken since her 60-second warning. The dark ship waited. The 32 ships advanced. The oscillation deepened. The 32 ships of the second formation ring advanced at standard tactical approach speed. Vorkai had ordered a full sensor sweep, and all 32 vessels were broadcasting their maximum range arrays toward the dark ship at the corridor's edge, flooding it with every wavelength of inquiry the Thranosai military had developed over 3,000 years of warfare. The dark ship received all of this information. It did not move. It did not respond. The deep oscillation in its energy core continued its slow, mathematical descent toward the configuration that the theoretical papers called impossible, that Issel's own mind kept presenting to him in the language of a nightmare he was having while completely awake. When the second formation ring completed its approach and came to holding position at standard engagement range, the dark ship exhaled. There was no other word for what the sensors showed. The resonance pulse that had neutralized 7 ships had been, as Issel had tried to tell everyone, a calibration. An outstretched hand measuring the distance to a surface before applying pressure. What the dark ship released now was not a calibration. It was a breath. A single, complete, three-dimensional resonance event that expanded outward from its hull in a sphere of structured mathematics that Issel's instruments captured in full, and his mind began processing and could not complete processing because the scale of what was happening did not have a category large enough to put it in. The pulse reached all 32 ships simultaneously. All 32 ships stopped. Not sequentially. Not in a cascade that a report could describe as Ship 1, then Ship 2, then simultaneously. As a single event. 32 vessels of the Thranosai 5th Imperial Fleet went from full operational status to complete signal absence in a window of time that Issel's instruments measured at 0.003 seconds. Not destroyed. Not breached. Not even damaged, as far as any sensor could determine. Just off. 39 ships gone in under 10 minutes. The bridge of the Semdas Eternal did not go silent this time. It made a sound, a collective sound, low and involuntary, from 340 throats, that Vorkai would later, in the small hours of something he would not survive to call memory, identify as the sound of certainty leaving a room all at once. Dorvan Kassa's skin had gone from battle gold to a pale, washed amber. The gold was bleeding out of it like color from a wound. Equipment, he started. He stopped. Even he could not finish the sentence. Vorkai stood at his command throne with the carved token from Kethvara held completely still in his left primary hand, not rolling, not moving, just held. His skin was still violet. The discipline of 3 centuries of command was holding it violet through what Issel suspected was a level of internal effort that no one on this bridge would ever fully appreciate. Number of ships remaining, Vorkai said. 88, Fleet Lord, Beth Sul said. Vorkai looked at the display for a long moment. His thumb moved once across the surface of the Kethvara token. Get me a channel to the human vessel. At her observation station, Archivist Thesu of the 7th Record had stopped composing their report. They were watching their display with an attention that their colleagues, had any been present, would have recognized as unusual, not because Thesu was leaning forward, or showing physical signs of agitation, but because Thesu had not blinked in 4 minutes and 17 seconds. In 4,400 recorded conflicts, Thesu had developed the professional habit of emotional distance. What they observed, they recorded. What they recorded, they filed. They had not felt the specific sensation currently occupying their chest cavity since the Battle of Ven Sulhuri Primary, an event 3,000 years ago that had defined the borders of their civilization's survival. The sensation was something they classified, in their private internal taxonomy, as the recognition of proportion. The moment when the size of what you were witnessing became real in a way that intellectual understanding had not prepared you for. 39 Thranosai vessels. In under 10 minutes. By a single ship that had not moved. Thesu opened a new channel, the emergency broadcast frequency, the one that reached every Ven Sulhuri observation post in a 50 light-year radius simultaneously, and said, in the formal archival tone that their training required regardless of circumstance. All posts. Full attention on Vethra corridor feed. Classification review pending. This is not a drill. In 4,400 conflicts, they had opened that channel 6 times. Across 50 light-years, Ven Sulhuri archivists stopped what they were doing and turned to their displays. Vorkai got his channel. The human vessel accepted the connection in 1.2 seconds, faster than any diplomatic protocol Veth Sul had on record, which meant the human on the other end had been expecting it. Had perhaps been waiting for it. Fleet Lord. Vorkai's voice carried all of its customary weight. All 3 centuries of it. He made sure of that. I would like to understand what I am dealing with. A pause. Brief. Professional. We found it, Yael Oren said. About 60 years ago. Took us 40 to figure out how to turn it on. The channel closed. Vorkai stood with the closed channel and the 88 remaining ships of his fleet and the carved token from Kethvara, and he looked at the display, and for the first time in 200 years of unbroken command, the violet of his bioluminescence flickered. It was barely visible. A fraction of a second. A tremor in the light. Issel saw it. He looked down at his station immediately, giving the Fleet Lord the privacy of not being observed in the moment. It was the most respectful thing he had done all day. 40 years to figure out how to turn it on. 40 years. The Vethkarani had been a civilization so advanced that their extinction, 40,000 years ago, remained the single greatest unsolved mystery in galactic archaeology. Their ruins were scattered across 200 light-years of space. Threnocii archaeologists had been studying those ruins for 6 centuries and had never successfully powered a single recovered system. Not once. In 600 years of trying. Humans had done it in 40. The dark ship waited. It had not moved. It had not advanced. It sat at the edge of the Vethra corridor like something that had decided, long ago, that patience was not a virtue but simply a state, the natural condition of something that did not need to hurry. Fleet Lord. Dorvan Kassa's voice had changed. Not much. But the gold was almost entirely gone from his skin now, and what remained had a flatness that Issel had never heard from him in 7 years of service. Your orders. Vorkai touched the Kethvara token once. Twice. Then he closed all 6 of his hands and stood completely still for 4 seconds. Full fleet. All remaining 88 vessels. Every weapon we carry. Maximum concentration of fire on the human vessel. We know only that their weapons are effective. That is not the same as invulnerability. Fleet Lord, Issel was standing before he had decided to stand. Again. Fleet Lord, I must formally object. The energy signature from that vessel is still increasing. Whatever the pulse events were, they were not the system's full output. If we engage at close range. Subnavigator. Koss turned this time. Fully. His eyes on Issel were not amused. They were the eyes of a being under extreme stress trying to locate something to be certain about, and the thing he had chosen was his anger at Issel. Sit down. The fleet will not survive a close-range full-output event, Issel said. He kept his voice steady. He was genuinely surprised by how steady it was. I am putting this on formal record. Then put it on formal record from your seat. Issel sat. Proc Nim, beside him, was looking at his own display. His skin had gone to a pale, washed gray. He reached over, without looking up, and adjusted something on his console that did not need adjusting. His hand was shaking. 88 ships of the Threnocii 5th Imperial Fleet advanced on the dark vessel. This was not a formation advance. Vorkai had abandoned formation, a direct line of Threnocii military power aimed at 340 meters of dark hull, driven by the specific, furious pride of a being who had not been wrong in 2 centuries and was not prepared to reclassify that streak as ended. At the lower station, Issel watched the energy readings and said nothing. The advance continued. The dark ship did not move. Koss ordered weapons to active charge. 43 weapon systems across 88 ships began their pre-discharge sequence. Then the dark ship's oscillation reached its theoretical maximum. Issel looked at the number his sensor array produced for the core resonance level. He looked at it for 3 seconds. Then he reached for his station's emergency broadcast toggle and turned it on. His voice went to 88 ships. All vessels, this is Subnavigator Issel Thor. Full reverse. Now. Full reverse now. The system is at maximum output. I repeat. The dark ship sang again. This was not a breath. In 4.1 seconds, less time than it took Vorkai to speak a single sentence, 61 ships of the Threnocii 5th Imperial Fleet ceased to be ships and became the memory of ships, which is a very different thing and significantly less useful in a military engagement. They did not explode. They did not breach. They did not produce debris fields. They were present. Then they were not present. The process between those two states was not visible to any sensor ISIL had access to. The interval was below instrument resolution. The methodology, whatever 40,000-year-old system had been operating in the dark of that hull, did not produce any conventional physical signature. No radiation bloom. No spatial distortion. No electromagnetic discharge. 61 ships. In 4.1 seconds. Gone. 27 ships remained. The vessels that had been at the back of the advance, the ones fractionally further from the dark ship when the system activated. They were intact. Unharmed. In full operational status. They had watched 61 of their fleetmates simply not be there anymore from a distance of 800 lengths, and their captains, experienced commanders, decorated officers, veterans of campaigns that had defined Thranosci military history, were, at this moment, doing something that no standing order covered and no protocol addressed. They were doing nothing. Complete signal silence from 27 ships. Just 27 ships, sitting in the space where 61 other ships had been, being quiet. At the observation post 4.7 light-years away, Archivist Thesu of the 7th Record looked at the engagement feed for exactly 9 seconds. Then they reached for the classification terminal. Decisive engagement. The 12th time in a career spanning millennia. They filed it without ceremony, because ceremony seemed smaller than what it was meant to mark. Then they opened the emergency broadcast channel again, the one covering 50 light-years, and all they said was, "All posts. Record and hold. Whatever happens next, record everything." Their voice, on that broadcast, was the voice of someone who had studied 4,400 conflicts and was now watching the 4,401st, and understood that after this one, the number 4,400 would be how historians described the time before. On the bridge of the Semdas Eternal, Beth Sewell had stopped reading names. She had read them for the first wave. 7 interceptors, each name delivered with professional precision. She had read the names of the second wave. 32 vessels. She could not read 61 names. She reported the number. She confirmed the remaining count, 27 vessels plus the Eternal, 28 total, and then she went quiet, because there was nothing else in her professional training that covered this specific situation. Dorvan Koss was gray. Not pale. Not washed. The deep, flat gray that Thranosci bioluminescence produced only under conditions of complete emotional override, when the system responsible for color and the expression of internal states simply ran out of signal to send. He was standing at his tactical station and he was gray and he had not spoken since ISIL's emergency broadcast. Vorkai stood at his command throne. He stood there for a very long time. Then he reached over, slowly, deliberately, with the specific care of someone performing an action they have decided in advance will be their last of its kind, and he picked up the carved token from Kethvara. He held it in his left primary hand. He looked at it. The piece of fortress wall that he had personally commissioned from a moon he had personally besieged for 11 years. Carried for 200 years. Touched before every decision that mattered. His proof that patience and power always win. He opened a channel. The dark ship answered in 1.2 seconds. Exactly as before. 28 ships remain, Vorkai said. His voice had everything it had always had. Every gram of 3 centuries. He was choosing to be exactly who he had always been for this, which ISIL, listening from his station, recognized as the bravest and most heartbreaking thing he had witnessed in 8 years of service. If I advance them, you will neutralize them. A pause. Yes. If I retreat. Have a good day. The channel closed. On the bridge, silence. Then Vorkai Semdas, Fleet Lord of the Thranosci 5th Imperial Fleet, Keeper of the House Semdas, unbroken for 200 years across 40 campaigns, lowered his head by exactly 3 degrees. Not a bow. Not a surrender. Something more private than either, the specific angle of a being absorbing something they will carry for the rest of their life. His skin flickered. The violet went unstable, cycling through shades that had no names in Thranosci emotional vocabulary because they described states that Thranosci commanders had not previously required language for. Issel watched his display. The dark ship's energy signature was changing again. Not rising. Shifting. Reconfiguring. The deep oscillation was reorienting in a direction his instruments could track but his mind could not predict. He ran an analysis. The analysis returned a result he read 3 times. He stood up for the 4th time. He walked from his lower station to the command level without being summoned and stood 2 lengths from Vorkai Semdas, closer than any officer of his rank was permitted to stand. Vorkai looked at him. In 340 years of life, Vorkai Semdas had looked at many things with many expressions. What he saw now was none of those. It was simpler than all of them. It was just a very old being, looking at a very young one, waiting to hear something. Fleet Lord, Issel said quietly. The system is reconfiguring for a spherical pulse event. The geometry of the new configuration, he stopped. Started again. It is oriented around this ship. Around the Eternal. Vorkai did not respond. The remaining 27 ships are not in the pulse geometry, Issel said. Only the Eternal. The carved token from Kethvara was still in Vorkai's hand. The bridge was absolutely quiet. At her observation post 4.7 light-years away, Thesu had the same data. They watched the configuration settle into its final orientation. They already understood what it meant. The dark ship was not finished. It had left 27 ships untouched, and it had oriented its system around one specific vessel, and there was a reason for that selection. A gesture so precise, so deliberate, so communicative that it could not be mistaken for anything other than what it was. A message. The dark ship, which had spoken 3 sentences in 30 minutes and moved not once, was sending a message. And the message was not to the fleet. The pulse did not come. Issel stood 2 lengths from Fleet Lord Vorkai Semdas and watched his sensor data, and the reconfiguration held its orientation, locked around the Semdas Eternal with the geometric precision of something that had made a decision and was waiting for the decision to be acknowledged, and it held, and held, and held. 31 seconds. 40. 1 full minute. The dark ship was not firing. It was pointing. The way a finger points. The way a teacher points at a student who has not yet understood the question and is being given, with extraordinary patience, additional time to understand it. Vorkai looked at the carved token from Kethvara for the last time. Then he placed it on the arm of his command throne. Set it down flat. With care. The way you set something down when you know you are not going to pick it up again. Veth. His voice, when it came, was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with volume control. Broadcast to remaining fleet. All vessels. Withdraw from the corridor. Full reverse. Do not engage. Do not respond to any communication from the human vessel. Make for Thranosci space. Veth Sul relayed the order. Her voice did not break. And the Eternal? Kos asked. Vorkai clasped all 6 hands behind his back. The Eternal holds position, he said. I believe we are being asked to stay. The Battle of the Vethra corridor lasted 23 minutes and 14 seconds. In those 23 minutes and 14 seconds, the Thranosci 5th Imperial Fleet suffered the following losses: 99 vessels confirmed neutralized. 0 debris fields. 0 distress signals recovered. 0 crew recovered. Combined crew lost, 44,211 beings. The dark ship suffered the following losses, none detected. 28 Thranosci vessels survived. 27 because the pulse geometry had excluded them, whether by mercy, precision, or indifference to their specific existence, no analysis would ever fully determine. 1 because it had been asked to stay. Issel Thor survived because he was on the one that stayed. He sat at his station for a long time after the withdrawal order, not composing reports, not running analyses, not blinking rapidly in the way that signaled his anxiety to anyone paying attention. He sat still. The display in front of him showed the energy signature of the dark ship, which had returned, after the 27 vessels cleared the corridor, to its original quiet state. The deep oscillation had settled. It was, once again, nearly silent. A 340-meter vessel of dark hull and ancient mathematics, sitting at the edge of a corridor that 127 ships had entered confident and left, those that left at all, as something fundamentally different from what they had been before. Issel looked at his screen for a very long time. Then he began to write his report. The Vensulhuri emergency broadcast reached the first populated systems within 6 hours of the engagement's conclusion. The information had spread the way extraordinary information spreads, not because anyone transmitted it deliberately, but because people who had seen it could not hold it still. The galactic community's response was silence. Not the silence of indifference. The silence of a very large number of civilizations receiving information simultaneously and needing, collectively, time to reorganize themselves around it. The Morkai Confederation, who had been watching the Thranosai fleet's approach with the professional interest of rivals who expected to benefit from whatever diplomatic damage the Thranosai sustained, went dark for 9 hours before issuing a brief communiqué that contained no political content and 3 requests for the full Vensulhuri censor record. The Kethvari Council, a civilization that had made, at a formal diplomatic session 14 months prior, a joke about human navigational capability that had been widely circulated and widely laughed at, did not issue a statement at all. But the response that the galaxy remembered, the one that entered the diplomatic record as the defining outside commentary on the Vethra corridor engagement, came from Archivist Thesu of the 7th Record. In their official submission to the Central Archive, Thesu appended a personal notation. A practice permitted to senior archivists of their rank, though rarely exercised. Thesu exercised the privilege once, in their career. The notation read: I have recorded 4,401 conflicts. In 4,400 of them, the outcome was determined by a comparison of forces. In the 4,401st, one party brought forces. The other brought something we do not have a record classification for. I recommend we create one. I recommend we call it, Patience with Teeth. It was quoted in 340 separate diplomatic communiques within the following week. It is still quoted. On the 3rd day after the engagement, a single transmission originated from United Earth Vessel Coordinator, Diplomatic Clearance Division. It was broadcast on the open galactic diplomatic frequency that every spacefaring civilization monitored. Commander Yael Oren spoke for 47 seconds. The Vethra Corridor is a designated human exclusion zone under Earth Charter Section 7, Article 3. This designation has been in effect for 6 years. The designation was filed with the Galactic Navigation Registry, the Vensulhuri Conflict Prevention Office, and transmitted directly to 17 spacefaring governments including the Thranosai Imperial Admiralty. The filing was acknowledged by all 17. The vessel currently operating in the corridor is under active survey designation and is not to be approached, boarded, or fired upon. Any vessel entering the corridor does so in violation of documented Earth Charter exclusion protocols. We will not be repeating this communication. The transmission ended. No threats. No descriptions of capability. No reference to what had happened 23 minutes and 14 seconds earlier, 3 days prior, in that same corridor. Just facts. Just the administrative language of a civilization informing the galactic community that the paperwork had been in order all along, that the correct offices had been notified through the correct channels, that the rules had been clear and available and ignored, and that the rules would remain in place. The open diplomatic frequency was quiet for 4 hours and 17 minutes after the transmission ended. No one had anything to say that seemed proportionate. Thor returned to Thranosai space on a transport, and he had a window seat, and the viewport showed stars, and he looked at them for most of the journey and thought about proportion. He thought about what he should have asked, in those 14 years of studying humans. Not what are they capable of, he had asked that, in his careful academic way, and gotten answers that he had then failed to make anyone listen to. The question he should have asked was different. Simpler. Why are they quiet? Not, what does their silence mean? But simply, why? What kind of thing chooses silence? What kind of thing moves through the galaxy generating minimal signal, claiming minimal territory, filing paperwork in the correct offices and acknowledging nothing and asking for nothing and waiting, for 6 years, while a designated exclusion zone sat in navigational records that 17 governments had confirmed receipt of? Waiting for someone to make the mistake that the filing had been designed to address. Patient things were quiet. Things that did not need to announce themselves were quiet. Things that had decided, long ago, that capability did not require advertisement. He had known this. He had written papers about it, in dry academic language, that 3 colleagues had read and not discussed further. He looked at the stars and thought about Vorkai Semdas, standing at his command throne with the carved token from Kethvara, and thought about the specific quality of the Fleet Lord's silence when he had set it down flat on the arm of the throne and not picked it up again. He thought, we were never dealing with a young civilization. We were dealing with something young that had found something old, and had spent 40 years learning to use it, quietly, without telling anyone. The way you practice a skill in private until the practice is complete. The 40 years was not the alarming part. The alarming part was that they had not told anyone. The alarming part was that they had not needed to. The Vethra corridor remained a designated human exclusion zone. No vessel entered it again. The humans did not change. There was no expanded human diplomatic presence. No territorial expansion. No fleet reviewed or revealed. No statement of capability. No acknowledgement that anything had changed. They moved through the galaxy as they always had. Quietly. Generating minimal signal. Filing their paperwork in the correct offices. Not announcing themselves. They had found something 40,000 years old in the ruins of a dead civilization, and spent 40 years learning to use it, and filed the paperwork that established their right to survey it, and waited. That was all. That was enough. Issel finished his formal report 3 weeks after returning to Thranosai space. He submitted it to the Imperial Admiralty Research Division. The final paragraph was not classified. It was the paragraph that appeared in the diplomatic histories of 4 civilizations within a decade. It was the paragraph that young officers in 3 separate military academies were required to read and discuss before receiving their commissions. It read: We asked the wrong question. We asked what humans could do, and we found the answer insufficient, and we discarded it. We should have asked what humans had chosen not to do. Capability without announcement is not absence of capability. Silence is not weakness. It is, in sufficient quantities, the most powerful thing in the universe. The galaxy laughed at them for 300 years. They did not respond. I have spent considerable time, since the Vethra corridor, thinking about what kind of thing does not respond to laughter. I have concluded, the kind of thing that is waiting for you to finish. He submitted the report. He closed the file. He sat at his desk for a long time, in the thin mineral air of his office, and looked at nothing. Somewhere, 4.2 light-hours from the edge of the Vethra corridor, a dark ship held its position. It did not broadcast. It did not move. It waited, in the silence it had always preferred, for whatever came next. Nothing came. Nothing came for a very long time. And that, the galaxy slowly understood, was not the ship being empty. That was the ship being patient.